Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of For What It's Nerd. Today, we are back with another episode regarding book haul. Now, as always with these episodes, it is usually best to watch these with video to get a full range of what's going on in the episode, so to speak. But I try as my best to keep it descriptive and relevant for those watching on other platforms as well. Other times, of course, we do have some. Let me start again. Sometimes we do, of course, have live episodes. Those are typically just for YouTube, but recently we've been kind of staying away from those. So generally, you're having just as good an experience on Spotify or Apple Music or anything like that as you are on YouTube. Now, with all that said, let's get into it. This is book haul for August 2024. This is from the last few months of what stuff I've got. We did the last one about 2 months ago. I think actually maybe 3 months ago at this point. And yeah, so I am pretty excited about this one. This first one up is the Star Trek RPG handbook, and to be honest with you, I don't get as much time as I'd like to play anything like this, but I saw this and I just loved it, and I don't have anything Star Trek in my collection currently. I do enjoy Star Trek. I did a huge binge a few years ago and really got into Star Trek for the first time, and ever since I've really tried to keep up with it. I'm a little bit behind currently, but I do love the franchise, and I saw this book and it's like a nice soft leather bounded book, and it just looks gorgeous. It's got the most iconic, perhaps, sci-fi quote of all time: "Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages." And it obviously doesn't finish it. But yeah, there's three different versions of this book actually. So you can get a command division, which is obviously in the yellow. I keep doing this with the book, by the way. I should probably do that so I don't wear it out. I'm rubbing around the front page. Command. There was also an engineering, and there was also a science version. Now these are all limited edition runs, I believe. So very excited to have this with me. I decided to go command because I just thought the yellow was very striking in general, and also I don't have that many kind of yellow books on my shelf, and yellow's always a really nice color. Anyway, yeah. So this book is an RPG book, so it's essentially your Dungeons and Dragons for Star Trek. Now, as you guys can see, there's a nice map to start us off there with the Romulan Star Empire, the Alpha Quadrant, the Thorian Assembly, etc., etc., the Gorn Germany, the Klingon Empire, and the Federation, of course. And then you get into the actual book, which has some great art throughout it. I've actually not taken too much time with the book. I didn't want to go too into detail, but what is actually really cool is that this book looks on the base level, because of the different colors that it uses. You think it's probably going to be just about the next, not the next generation, sorry, the original series, because it uses the original series colors. But no, it's not that. It does follow the full time. It does use the full timeline, as you can see by the different outfits of the Federation here, and it does give you a nice in-depth rundown of basically the Federation and its technologies and its law, which is really good from a perspective of, like, even if you don't play RPGs, even if you don't play your Dungeons and Dragons, your stuff like that, this is like a great collection of information, right? You've got the Cardassian Union, you've got the Klingon Empire, you've got the Borg, the Orions, you've got information on everything you could possibly want. So even from a perspective of, just, learning about Star Trek, learning a bit more about the lore, this is a great place to do that. And, what I was interested by is, and I think there's a section on this, let me check. The Star Trek primer. I'm looking for, because Star Trek is an interesting. Yeah, here we go. So here's some of the races, some of the Andorians, the Aenar, the Bajorans, the Betazoids, and obviously we go on: Cardassians, Denobulan, etc., etc. Ferengi, Orion, lots of different cool species in here. But also, what I was interested in, and where are we at with this, is here, which is space combat, because space combat is going to be very important to a Star Trek game. And yeah, there's actually a lot of detail being put into all of this, and you can just see how Starship fundamentals, and it goes into all the systems. And so like really cool for if you're even just like, even if you're taking something that isn't necessarily Star Trek and you want to do something your own, you have all this here that's just kind of like the command, the con, engineering, security, medicine, science, etc. You know, like, and just again, it's just such a striking. It's like a real. It almost feels like a manual, right? And then you've got all the ships. You've got the NX, the Constitution, the Excelsior, Ambassador, California, Galaxy, Intrepid, etc., right? And like just, and then obviously you have ones for other uh factions as well. Just really cool. And one of my favorite things about this book actually is the timeline at the back, as well as the not placeholders, what are they called? Bookmarks, which interestingly, I thought there was only two, and then I've just found one whilst I was going through the book. That's actually a third one. Get that one out as well. So in this book, you actually get 3 bookmarks, which I think is really cool, because one thing that I think is very true is that when you're using this kind of book for actual play, you're going to want to keep a few pages, a few sections together, and also just those colors look really cool together. It's very Star Trek in its way. Yeah, so I really like that as well. Really cool. But yes, so the timeline, and this essentially goes the canon screen timeline, the Prime Universe timeline, and then the Terran Universe timeline. So it really shows a nice, in-depth look at the universe and the different timelines as well, which I think is a really good thing, because it means that you've got real scope to play with and knowing where you are within them. For example, obviously you've got the Star Trek Enterprise here, and then you've got Discovery season 3 to 5 at the end here. So this is a really up-to-date book. But yeah, so I mean, obviously I could go into a lot more depth about this book, but I don't want to spend all day on it. So we're going to move over to the other sci-fi universe now, not Star Trek anymore. We're going to Star Wars, and this one's one that I was waiting for a while. This is The Rise and Fall of the Galactic Empire, and I actually haven't touched it yet, which is typical of me. But this book is essentially, even though it's written as a normal book, it's more like a reference book. It's more like a thesis on, like, I don't know how to describe it. It's a thesis on the universe as to on like essentially the rise and fall of the empire through the eyes of someone who actually lives in the universe. So this is an in-universe book. Rise and consolidation, and like there's all little if you look at it, it's literally written like an academic paper. It's got little footnotes and everything, and it's got pictures as well of like from Andor, from other shows, other movies. Just great in the way they've done it. Expansion and oppression, and so yeah, it's really done in a really cool way that lets you kind of sink into the Star Wars universe in a way that you got with some of the other books that they used to do. They used to do some reference guides like the Jedi Path and the Book of the Sith and stuff, and that feels very much in this vein, except for obviously this has been done as an actual full-on book this time. I want more like this. I love these types of books. There was one that they did for the expanded universe previously that was like a guide to warfare basically, and it was like just so interesting to read through and like kind of pick apart like the Star Wars universe from that perspective. So that's one that I really am excited about, and I love that kind of like depth of like involvement in the Star Wars universe. I just think people want that stuff. People enjoy kind of learning about the kind of the world, but it's a world building book, right? And I think that's cool. I think it's very similar to, Tolkien had books that were very much about setting the tone for his world, and I think sometimes they're really a cool idea, and like that's why I think I enjoy getting RPG handbooks as well, getting a sense of these worlds, especially as someone who likes to write. I think they're really cool in that way. So those two are very similar, even though they're very distinct in their own ways. I'm just going to put these on the floor, so I'll be 2 seconds. And then we have our Marvel comics. Now, I'm behind on these. I'm really, really behind. So we're going to go through and kind of discuss them a little bit. I have finished one of these. I haven't touched most of the others. But yeah, so first we have Imperial, which is the new X-Men. And essentially this is, I'll read the blurb. Professor Xavier's school for gifted youngsters has never been busier, and the threats against the X-Men have never been more deadly. As mutant kind enters a bold new era, the challenges they face become even more extreme. John Sublime and his U-Men continue to press their attack against the mutant heroes, but there's a far worse danger on the horizon as Cassandra Nova, who just showed up in obviously Deadpool and Wolverine, returns, this time with the incalculable power of the alien Shi'ar Empire at her disposal. So again, I haven't read this one yet. I did read the first half of this, but Cassandra is obviously a very formidable villain, and I really like the art style in this one. So I can't wait to get back into this one when I have a chance. The X-Men are something that I'm becoming a lot more appreciative of more recently. It's not that I haven't really. I've always liked the X-Men, but I think that I'm getting more of an appreciation now for them, especially because obviously Marvel is ramping up its kind of inclusion of them in general at the moment. Ultron Unlimited, this is one that I've read a decent portion of, and I can see already in this one a lot of the influence for Age of Ultron probably comes from this book. There's a whole nation that he attacks and destroys and takes over, etc., etc. in this. So I personally, I've got to be honest, I really like the art style in this one. I find this art style to be crowded. I'll show you guys quick on camera. It's very early 2000s to me personally. Is that when it was done? 1 second, let me check. I'm going to make sure that I'm not like showing myself up here. Does it say when this was done? Oh no, it was the 90s. Which, to be fair, yeah, still similar, very similar art style. And I don't like this kind of art style. I think it's too, it's too flat on the page, in my opinion, and I think it's kind of painful to look at in places. It's a bit like that. Like that page is just a mess. Like, there's far too many colors on it, in my opinion. You know, far too much going on, far too many things going on. But I enjoy the story, and I think that it's going to be an interesting one. I do really like Ultron as a villain, and you know, it's interesting seeing a story that isn't Age of Ultron itself, because you know the Age of Ultron story is, you know, in its own way, unique and iconic, and pretty much the defining Ultron story, of course. But this is like interesting to see like more Ultron, because Ultron is not just a one-time villain, you know, he's a very regular villain of the Avengers. So seeing a bit more of him was cool. But yeah, it is interesting that you've got a book that is probably more akin to the Age of Ultron storyline than the actual Age of Ultron storyline. Like, so the Age of Ultron storyline in the movies is more akin to this, I'd say, than the actual Age of Ultron storyline, to me at least. Dark Reign. This is the Dark Avengers. In the wake of the Skrulls' attempted invasion of Earth, S.H.I.E.L.D. has been dismantled, and the public faith in their superpower protectors is at an all-time low. Now, a new group of costumed champions has arisen to keep the people safe, and they're led by none other than Norman Osborn, once the cackling supercriminal known as the Green Goblin. With villains masquerading as twisted versions of Earth's mightiest heroes, the world has just become a much more dangerous place for those on both sides of the law. I've read this before. This is one that I've read before, and I don't remember too much of it, I've got to be honest with you, but this is more the style of art that I like. See, this kind of, not muted necessarily, but not even the realism that I like about this. I just think the color palette is more accurate, more correct. Like across a page there, I look at that and I don't feel overwhelmed compared to what we just saw before. But yeah, very excited to get through this. I always enjoyed the Dark Avengers concept because you get to see, it's always that thing of like, oh, imagine the good guys as bad guys and the bad guys as good guys, and what would that mean and how would that look? And yeah, Doom obviously is very featured, very bigly, very largely featured in this, and just Norman Osborn is like pretending to be a hero is always an interesting concept, because he's done it a few times in different ways. So yeah, very excited to get into that one when I do. Now this is one that I've actually finished. This Blue I have finished. This is a retelling of earlier Spider-Man stories through the lens of Peter later in life, who is lamenting the loss of Gwen Stacy. Not a day goes past where Peter Parker doesn't think of his first true love, Gwen Stacy, cruelly taken from him by the Green Goblin. She was the girl of his dreams. Now, writer Jeff Loeb and artist Tim Sale, is it Sale? I think it's Sale, take you back to the early days of the Wall-Crawler's adventures for a beautiful, bittersweet tale unlike any other. This is the untold story of Peter and Gwen and how they fell in love. And whilst, again, this isn't my favorite art style, I don't love it, I think the color schemes are a lot better here. I think it gives that sense of earlier comics without making it feel so dated as the earlier comics. But what I think is also nice about this story is the narrative is not actually the story that's happening. The narrative is about the grief Peter's feeling, as I just kind of said in the blurb. And the story is very understated because of that. In fact, the kind of end fight, so to speak, isn't really an important thing at all. There's an end fight between Craven and Peter, and it just doesn't feel like it's relevant to the story in the slightest. I'm trying to find it now. 1 second. Where are we at? Yeah, and it like it ends in like, not saying that every fight ever ends, but it ends in like 3 pages. Like Craven comes in. Well, sorry, it's more than that. But Craven comes in 1 page, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pages of actual conflict. And that's it for Craven, who's been lurking in the background of this whole 6-issue run. And so like it feels like the story is not at all about the villains in this one, which I liked. I liked the idea that it was about the trauma and the stress and the worry and the concern that he'd faced through Gwen. So yeah, that was a really fun one to read. Obviously bittersweet, but in a good way. Little hits now. We had a little bit of a Hawkeye run not long ago, and of course I've watched the Hawkeye show, but getting to know Hawkeye and Kate in actuality through their comic and kind of getting a rougher, less sanitized version of the two characters is really fun. And you've got Kingpin as a big part of this storyline as well, and yeah, Mr. Negative, and I'm very excited again to read through this. But the coloring in this is also great because they use purple very well, but they also use a lot of other colors to really understate stuff. And Matt Fraction is great, and also just I think sometimes the way they panel things in these Hawkeye comics is really fun as well. Just straightforward, relatively clear, muted to a degree in here, and then they kind of amp it up again. So there's like you see like the difference, but it's like really nice, and I really like it, and I like the switch between styles as they go through, and to show like danger and stuff as well. It feels like that other one we were looking at earlier for Ultron. It's just a mess of colors for anything, but here, the red's showing because there's this ultra violent moment, and then you go back to something that's a little bit cooler thereafter. So the color palette actually means something, which I think, again, orange, kind of a warmth there. I know it's a bit, maybe a bit too analytical of the actual what's happening, but it's true to a degree. And yeah, so very excited to get more into this. I also like what I also love about comics, and this is what I was watching What If again for a bit the other day. I love things like this where the characters all end up being together and all hanging out together, and characters pop up in other people's runs, and like I think that's always fun. I think like seeing Kingpin and Mr. Negative in a Hawkeye comic is the reason that comics are the coolest thing ever, really. It's just nice seeing characters together and seeing them kind of cross over. That's the whole point of the Marvel universe. Then we have Reborn. Reborn is the living legend returns. Sharon Carter, Bucky Barnes, the Black Widow, and the Falcon discover that there's more to the Captain America's assassination than they ever could have realized. As the full horror of the Red Skull's plan becomes apparent, his allies battle against the odds to rescue their friend, now truly a man out of time. Can his body and soul be reunited, or is the Red Skull set to win his greatest victory over the Sentinel of Liberty? I'll always enjoy a Captain America story. I always knew about the assassination of Cap in that way, but I actually haven't read the story, so I'm really looking forward to seeing what goes on to cause it, essentially, because Red Skull and Captain America have such a storied history, but I think this is actually one of the bigger stories that they go through, and I haven't even read it, so another one to add to the list, and loads of different characters showing up in this, as you guys just saw: Spider-Man, Black Widow, Hawkeye, Doctor Doom. You know, the lot. Doom's showing up a lot at the moment, but I get why, because they're trying to push Doom a little bit more ahead of the new movies. But yeah, so this has been a fun week for comics and for books in general. I'm very excited to get through these. I keep saying that, but it's true. And I hope you guys have enjoyed. I don't know what next week's podcast will be just yet. It's been a little bit slower on news this week, aside from the Craven trailer, which I thought about discussing, but I don't think it's maybe worthwhile discussing until the movie's out, because I think it might be a footnote in the Marvel universe, so to speak. But yes, thank you guys as always for watching / listening. If you have enjoyed this, let me know. I always do enjoy doing my book hauls, my book discussions. So let me know if you have enjoyed, and we'll see you again very soon. Thank you as always, and have a great rest of your week. Bye, guys.